Hey, I'm PopPop, and thanks for coming to my LitRPG world tonight. I am absolutely honored to have James A. Hunter as my guest. Hello, James. How are you?
I am super well. I am really excited to be here. It's always
Me
fun
too. I'm so glad you're here.
to.
I've got your books up in the background here.
I
You
see
have
them.
your
They're
books in the
great.
background. You know, it's a good setup there over my shoulder.
I love it.
So, first thing I want to talk about real quick is about a month or two ago, you had a really great interview with Just Jess on her In Other Worlds. In that, you talked very nice and long and wonderfully about the publishing industry and everything that's going on with that. We are going to avoid that because that's was an awesome discussion. If anybody wants to hear that, go to Just Jess in Other Worlds podcast site and look it up. I listened to it. It was phenomenal. Tonight we're talking books. That's what Pop-Up is all about, and that's what we want to do. So currently, your truly current series is Discount Dan.
Yes, this one right here, Discount Dan. There's the first book, Kiosk Cul-de-sac Carnage is book 2. That one's out, and book 3, which is Kiosk Kingdom, is done. I'm super happy. It's been done for probably a couple months, actually. I turned it over, went through the editing process, and then I turned it over to Audible. Steve is working on it, and I was really hoping to get the third book out this year. But and normally, like if I was just publishing it, like Shadow Alley was just publishing it, it probably would have been out this year. But Audible likes to have a slightly longer time horizon on their audio releases, so they can do like some marketing stuff and they can prep their machine to go into action. So we did get them to push up the date. It's scheduled for mid February 2026. Again, I was hoping it would be this year, just didn't happen. But I'm super excited. It's really good. It's long. It's longer than the other two are not short, but this one is over 200,000 words. So it's a big chunky boy.
Yeah, it is.
I'm so excited for how it turned out. It's really weird. It's less body horror than book 2. Book 2 had quite a lot of body horror in it with the Sunnysiders and the Tiny Tots and the Cannibal Kids. But this one still has some phenomenally weird set pieces and some very strange, fun characters that I'm really excited for people to get to read and check out.
Well, as long as you can churn out another 996 books for me, I am happy as all get out with this series. Then,
I love to hear it. I love to hear it. Yeah, and I'm really happy. Book 1 had the reception was a bit slower than I had anticipated because I've been doing this for a long time, so I kind of have a pretty good idea of what benchmarks I should be hitting for the releases. And early on with Discount Dan, I was like, oh man, I'm just not sure that this series is going to hit. And I think a lot of the initial trepidation, because it does channel a lot of DCC energy. And so I think a lot of the initial trepidation were readers that were saying like, this is just going to be a Dungeon Crawler Carl ripoff or a clone. And even though they're that kind of horror comedy, weird surrealism vibe is there, I tried to take it in a different direction. And I think after people started reading it, and then they post to Reddit or on Facebook, and they're like, no, it's like this, but wildly goes in this own different direction, and it has its own voice. And now I think that the wheels are kind of turning, and people are discovering it and really enjoying it. So I'm happy for that.
I think the way that I would compare it to is when people say, well, it's just DCC differently done. To me, it's when you have a horror movie, and in the beginning of a horror movie, it says, this is based on a true story.
Yeah.
Okay. But then everything else is utterly different. Well, if this is based on DCC, everything's totally different. The magic systems are totally different. You don't have a system imposed by a bunch of corporate greedy swine fish from outer space.
Yeah.
It is, to me, it looks like, it's a derelict something.
Yeah.
That's been hanging around for thousands of years. But it's been taking people for hundreds of years.
That's right.
So, I mean, there is a lot going on. It's been around and all that kind of fun stuff. And of course, you know one thing, and I'm bringing it up right now. Gary Bradley is sitting there.
Yes.
He's wearing his real imitation Versace bathrobe.
I am happy to say that yours is literally in the mail. I sent it off this morning. I wanted to get it out sooner, but the true story behind the robes is like we don't have like a company putting these together. Like I order a bunch of robes from Walmart, and then I have all these patches that I have to like iron on and so you just imagine me hunched over my kitchen countertop with an iron, just laboriously hand ironing on all of these patches onto these robes to send out. So they just, and then, Walmart gets backed up or the patches get backed up from Amazon. So they just take longer to produce than I like, but yours is in the mail and it's headed your way. So now, you'll be in the crew soon.
What I really want to know is where can I get a pair of jorts?
Yeah, funny enough,
I want to wear them when I get to LitRPG Con.
I have a pair of jorts. I can't remember where I ordered them from, but it was surprisingly hard to find. Like I remember, back in the late 80s, early 90s, like jorts were like a thing. It seems like jorts are not so much a thing anymore, and it's surprisingly hard to find a company that sells like pre-jorted jorts. So that's it's been trickier than I thought.
Gims would kill me if I would show up in jorts or shorts, as a matter of fact, at this point. So I'm so thrilled that Kiosk Kingdom is going to be coming out. It will be in my grubby hands being read the day it comes out after Amazon.
Love to hear it.
So, and I will tell you, I am putting together my top 10 faves for the year.
Yeah.
So the series, Discount Down series, is in the top 3.
Oh man, I love that.
I do not. Of the 10, 7 of them aren't going to, are just going to be random out in the back end. The top 3 will mean that those are my top faves.
I want to hear some of your other faves, because I'm as much as I'm a writer, I am a huge reader. I started out when I first started self-publishing. I started out in urban fantasy, and I discovered LitRPG like very early on in 2015, and I fell in love with it. And eventually, I was like, well, I'm still writing urban fantasy. I was like making a living writing urban fantasy. And I was like, well, I don't know if there's a market for this, because it was so small and so new, but I loved it so much. I was like, well, I'm just going to try my hand, and I'm going to write a series. Kind of thinking that it was not going to make any money or go anywhere, but just because I really love the genre. I love the idea of like mashing these video games with these with these stories. But ever since then, I mean, LitRPG and progression fantasy is almost all I read now. I do occasionally read some horror, but man, I've kind of fallen away from like the epic fantasy that I used to read a lot of. It's just like LitRPG it's really hard to go back because it's so much fun. It's when I'm reading like an epic fantasy, I'm like, oh, these are his powers. And then I'm like, oh, these are the only powers he's going to have for the rest of the story. Yeah. That's it. I'm like, that's not as much fun. I want to see cool new upgrades and all kinds of stuff. And it just doesn't happen. But so what are some of your other favorite series that you're enjoying this year?
Well, obviously DCC brought me in back in January when I walked into Books A Million. Before that, I was reading, science fiction. I was reading Jodi Taylor's Chronicles of St. Mary's time traveling series. I mean, gotcha. I was gobbling that up until that day I walked in and said, "Ooh, look at that shiny cover!" And then
it is a good looking cover. Those the re-releases they're very nice.
The only paperback I have is Book 7. That was still up on Amazon. And I could buy it for before the Ace came out. So
yeah,
some more of my favorites. Kamatoans, Rise of a Monster.
I actually have just to brag a little bit here. I have one of the original paperbacks signed by Matt here. So
well, the one I have
yourself nerd. That's what it says inside, which is very perfect, very on brand.
I was I was talking to Andrew last night. Yesterday, he was showing me some of his really, really rare DCC books. That was kind of cool just to be able to see some of the stuff he has. Rise of a Monster by Kamatoan.
I haven't tried that one yet.
I love it. The second book's out already. Magic Murder Cube Marine.
Yes.
Oh my God. I hope he does more.
Me too. Alex is super talented. We're contracted. So for those who don't know, Magic Murder Cube Marine is one of the books that Shadow Alley puts out. And it's fantastic. I mean, I remember reading it on Royal Road and just like thinking, man, this guy knows how to tell a story. He knows how to really bring these characters to life. It's so funny. There's good action in it. There's, it's really balanced, well-paced book. And it's very in line with the kind of stuff that I like to read, and mostly what Shadow Alley publishes, the stuff that I like to read, which is kind of a nice position to be in where I'm like, yes, this book is awesome. It deserves to be in the world. Let's publish it. And I love Magic Murder Cube Marine. It's so good.
It's phenomenal. It's so absurd. And I can understand why you would like it. It has total grunt in it. So
yeah, I mean, for sure.
He is just the greatest character who just does not understand what the hell is happening to him.
Yeah.
Kind of like Dan. So, a very similar situation.
I have a type. Yeah.
This year, again, everything LitRPG is this year for me.
Yeah. So you're pretty new to the genre.
I'm a newbie. I am brand new. I mean, I have 50 years or 40 years of reading other genres and then ignoring GameLit, Tracy Hickman, Salvatore. Why do D&D in a book? I just ignored it through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and whatever. It just did not interest me as I was reading everything else.
Yeah.
To go on with another series, my first series that I binged was Jez Kajayo's Rise of Mankind.
Oh yeah, so good.
Still have, we have to move on to book 9 eventually. There's Gary going Vigil Bound. I'm reading it now, Gary. Can you see the comments? You should be able to.
Oh yeah, I haven't been paying attention as much, but I can't see them. Yeah, this is the first book, Vigil's Justice, in that series.
And I am right at the very, very crunchy part where Boyd is learning all about his upgrades and whatnot. So yeah, I got sucked into that. So I'm really perturbed at James again to have me read more than one of his series.
I'm sorry. Now. There's so many. That's I guess either the blessing or the curse is I've been around long enough in the LitRPG space that I have I got a lot of series. I got Viridian Gate Online, obviously was my first one. Rogue Dungeon, Shadowcroft Academy, Vigil Bound, Wasteland Warlords, Discount Dan. They keep racking up. I can't stop myself.
So where does Wasteland Warriors fit into the world? What has to be read before you can understand what's going on there?
So it was written to be its own standalone. Here, I'll be right back. Let me just grab so people can see it. And these guys are fun. They're short little guys. It's complete. There's 6 of them. And what had happened is that Audible Studios had wanted to experiment with shorter fiction, kind of in the 2 to 5 hour range for sort of like casual binge listeners who wanted to listen in, a long car ride or something like that. And I remember telling them, like, I don't think this is going to work, guys. Like, these are too short. No one's going to spend audio credits on these. And they said, don't worry, we're going to put it in the Plus catalog, so it'll be free for everybody. And I said, that might do it. So they're short, but there's fun, and it's complete series. There's 6 of them. They're written to be a standalone series. So even if you've read nothing else, you can still go into that first one. You can read it all the way through to the end. There's some little plugs of characters from the series it's connected to, which is Rogue Dungeon. But even if you don't know that, you'll still be able to enjoy the series fully. I think that if you read Rogue Dungeon first, you'll be tickled a little bit more. The first book in the Rogue Dungeon series is this one right here. But the premise of Wasteland Warlords is it basically takes place about 20 years after the events of the main series, Rogue Dungeon, have happened. In that series, there's kind of this apocalyptic event that happens later in the series where these monsters basically start bleeding into our world in kind of this miniature system apocalypse. And what the U.S. government does is they try to contain it. They build this, they basically give up Southern California, and they build this enormous wall around it to contain the spread of all of these magical items and monsters that are pouring over into our world. But as time has progressed, so it's about 20 years after that event's happened, and people can apply for homesteader licenses to go back and try to reclaim parts of the wasteland and to clear out the dungeons and the monsters that have inhabited this part of Southern California. So the premise is the main character is a guy named Clay. His wife, Alex, had a cancer diagnosis that was untreatable. And he thinks, hey, there's literal magic in this wasteland that's claimed by all of these monsters. If we go there, we might be able to find a way to save you. So they've sold everything off. They go into the wasteland, and Clay's dumb redneck brother, Joe, tags along with them. He's very much Florida man in every sense of the word. And they go in, they take on the wasteland, and they're trying to find a literal cure for cancer. And there's all kinds of dungeons to run, and there's sort of town settlements to build. And the idea is people who go in here don't necessarily have classes in the way that you do in System Apocalypses. But if you manage to kill a dungeon lord, you can claim the dungeon lord's power, and you become what's called an incant, which is basically a modern superhero. The government recruits incants to fight wars and do other things. And so they very specifically target a dungeon lord with an insane health regen, knowing that if they can get Alex to kill this dungeon lord, she'll have enough Wolverine health regen to be able to beat off this terminal disease. So it's fun. It's kind of a family drama set in this post-apocalyptic slice of Southern California, but it's not like most System Apocalypses where you're seeing it unfold real time. There's a lot of chaos. Like, this is a well-known thing that people have been dealing with for several years. And so there's still a lot of mystery involved. But it's really fun. And Travis Baldry does the narration. I mean, Travis Baldry could narrate a phone book. I would listen to it, and they're all free through Audible Plus. So it's really a fun series, especially if you like audio.
So it's a win-win. It's a win for me because they're nice small books.
Yes,
I do have volume 1 up there someplace over in here somewhere.
Yeah,
I kind of know where all my books are. So and then for listening to Travis, without a doubt. So Discount Dan, that series is on. The narration is by the amazing Steve Campbell.
Yeah, he does such a great job. I'm really fortunate. So, funnily enough, I actually have my own little audio recording booth. I'd wanted to get into audio narration, not for any particular business reason, just because I thought it was fun. I read stories to my kids at night, and I do funny voices, and I thought, this is fun. I could do this. I could see myself doing this. So when I originally wrote Discount Dan, I wrote it specifically for me to narrate. That was the plan. And I'd actually narrated half the book. And Steve had helped me because I was still learning the ropes. And so he was walking me through, Reaper settings and figuring out how to do room tone. And he was working on character voices with me. And so he and I had worked on it a whole bunch. And then when Audible Studios approached me about it, they're like, hey, we want to pick up a series from you, and we're interested in Discount Dan. I was like, I've been wanting to work with Audible Studios for a long time, but I'm halfway through recording this book. They're like, well, you can send over the files. We'll listen to it. And then they listen to it, and they're like, good try, champ. We're going to get a real narrator to do this thing. And they're like, but do you have any suggestions? And I was like, well, it's got to be Steve, because Steve already knows all of these characters. He's already been working with me on the voices and on all of these things. And so Audible was able to onboard Steve. And I feel like he has really gone above and beyond in his performance. Like, you can really tell that he's just pouring his all into it on the performance side. And I think it really comes through.
Yeah, he better show up tonight, because I want to, try to get him on board with an interview at some point next year.
Oh, that'd be great. He's so nice too. He's just like the sweetest guy.
He popped into the interview that the long-winded one did with no croc puppets. Those are scary, even though I love croc. That the long-winded one did with Ryan Maxwell. He was the quote-unquote special guest, and he popped in on that interview as well. So
I really like Ryan, and I really liked Grand System Bending as well.
God, yes. Really big time. Yep. I ordered a hardback and a paperback from Legion. They had a little bit of a delay in their printing process, so of course I got Amazon to deliver it first, and now the other 2 volumes are coming my way, so they'll be here next week. And it'll go up on my shelf real fast, and hopefully I'll be able to slot it in, because I really like the whole team base work with the first volume there. I do have Discount Dan on Audible.
Yeah,
so I will listen to audio once I finish the book.
Gotcha.
I have to experience it.
No, totally.
My eyes and my brain before I can get it to my ears. And that's just the way it is. And when you go back to the Vigil Bound, the Vigil series, you got Luke Daniels. You have like seriously solid narration going on in your books.
Yeah, we got some good guys. Armin Taylor does Viridian Gate Online. He does a fantastic job. He's kind of stepped out of the audio narration space, and now he's doing a lot of voiceover work for various animes and television production shows. So he's not really doing as many audiobooks because he's, his talents were in high demand, but he does a really phenomenal job with the audio production of VGO. Nick Padell narrates Rogue Dungeon, and Nick Padell is one of my favorites in the game. I mean, he's just got such range. But Luke Daniels is 100% like, if I had to put together a slate of the top 5 narrators, it's all of the ones that I've worked with, honestly. There's a couple of new ones that are making some headway. I really like Jonathan McLean. I've listened to some of his audiobooks, and he's got a really good range. But like I said, Travis Baldry, Luke Daniels, Nick Padell, Armin Taylor, Steve Campbell, like these are, in my mind, some of the greatest in the genre. They're so good.
And I just want to say hi to Joe Dan. Joe Dan is in the audience. He's going to be sitting down with me in 2026, as is Mr. Merle. He is in there hiding away too. I'll be
both of those are Shadow Alley guys. Funny story about Joe Dan. So I love Joe Dan to pieces. Joe Dan is a wounded vet. He was a Greenside corpsman, so he's part of the Navy. But so the Marine Corps does not have its own medics. So instead, we have Navy medics that are called Greenside corpsmen that are attached to Marine Corps units that serve as our medics. And Joe Dan was a Greenside corpsman deployed to Iraq. I think it was Iraq, not Afghanistan, but I could be mixing that up. And suffered an IED attack, ended up losing a leg. He and I met back probably in 2015 or 2016. I think even before I had started writing LitRPG. So the story of how we met is I was writing urban fantasy at the time. And this was, I was still like real new, real green behind the ears. And Joe Dan like messaged me on Facebook or something. He was like, "Hey man, I've read these urban fantasy books. They're so good." Oh yeah, Daniel's, he's super good. He's like, but I've read these urban fantasy books. I love them so much. They really speak to me as a vet. And so we got to talking, and I was like, dude, this is a total random internet stranger. I was like, you should just come over to my house for a barbecue, random internet stranger, and meet my whole family. And he was like, I don't think that's safe for you. I don't think you should just like invite random internet people to your house. I was like, nah, you're good, man. Just come over to my house. I just like gave him my address, and he like showed up, and we had a barbecue, and we have been friends pretty much ever since. He's always, every year that we go out to Dragon Con, he comes down and volunteers to help run the booth. We do a big Shadow Alley retreat once a year, and he comes and hangs out, and we've been bugging him. We're like, man, you should write a book. And he was like, I don't know, I'm just a reader. And then finally he was like, okay, I think I have a story to tell. And so me and a bunch of the other Shadow Valley folks kind of talked him through the process, and he did the work. Like, it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to sit your butt down in the seat and actually do the work. And Jodan did the work, and Wayspring Wanderer is the result. And it is such a great book and such a great series. So I'm really blessed to have known Jodan for all these years, and also that he did not murder me and my family in our household that first day that we met. So
Jodan, was that a possibility? Could that have happened?
I'm going to say, knowing Jodan, this is going to be a terribly inappropriate joke, but Jodan will laugh. He would not have been able to murder me because I can definitely outrun him. That is probably my single. He's much beefier than I am. Like if it was a bench pressing competition, Jodan is going to clean it every day of the week. But in a foot race, I'm going to beat Jodan 100 times out of 100 times. Wow. I got this.
That's going to make it up to TikTok or something. I just know it will.
So and again, this is kind of like Marine Corps vet humor. One of my favorite all-time Jodan stories, this was probably 2 years ago at Dragon Con. So Jodan was out working the booth. He's got a prosthetic leg, but he also has a wheelchair. And usually he's like up and around on his feet, but sometimes he'll be in his wheelchair. And he was up working the booth, and his wheelchair was sitting over by the service elevators. I had been like running back and forth from panels, and I was like worn out. It's Atlanta. It's hot. It's sweaty. I come in. I'm like obviously dying. And Jodan's like, and there's like no place to sit in the vendor hall. And Jodan's like, hey, why don't you go sit in my wheelchair and like take a load off? And I was like, nah, dude, it's okay. He's like, dude, just go sit down in the wheelchair, take a break, come back in 5 minutes. I'm fine. And I was like, are you sure? He's like, yeah. So I go and I sit down, and I'm like resting. And Jodan takes off his leg. He sits down on the floor, and then he starts scooting across the aisle, waving his leg, and he says, James Hunter stole my wheelchair, and he hates veterans. He hates wounded veterans. And this is like at the top of his lungs in the middle of Dragon Con, scooting toward me with his leg raised over his head. I almost died laughing. It was maybe one of the funniest things I have ever seen in my entire life, and I will never stop telling that story. It's so funny.
Oh, it's definitely one to tell. That's for sure. So we have those interviews coming up, and thank you guys for showing up. Greatly appreciated. BJ's always here, and Gary is always, he's a supporter of everybody, LitRPG. So I appreciate the usuals showing up as well.
We thank you all.
Yep, for sure. The Shadowcroft Academy.
Yeah.
What's up with that one? Because, I'm a little bit, I don't know. I think I'm school phobic.
Yeah.
Academy phobic.
So Shadowcroft, of all of this, so that one I co-wrote with Aaron Michael Ritchie. It is, of all of the books that I've ever written, it is the most bizarre. It's not even close. Even more bizarre than Discount Dan in some ways. But it doesn't have the same horror elements to it. It's kind of like this Lewis Carroll acid trip, but it's strangely wholesome. So kind of the premise behind Shadowcroft Academy, the main character's a guy named Logan. He's a disabled Army vet, and he basically gets last starfighter through a thing that's explained in the book, and he gets reincarnated as a monster, and he learns that all of the dungeons, all of the dungeon lords are not actually the bad guys. They're protecting sort of this universally valuable resource that heroes are trying to plunder. Heroes think they're doing a good thing by purging the world of dungeons, but dungeons are actually like this natural, non-renewing resource that can go away. And so it's their job to keep heroes from getting it. But they have to learn how to be dungeon core. So it's kind of this academy where they go to classes, but really the classes are all about how to build traps and how to cobble dungeons and how to kill heroes and the ethics of killing heroes. And so it's really, really strange. It's super fun. It's very wholesome. It's kind of hard to explain in that it is an academy, and it does happen at an academy. But so much of it is kind of this weird dungeon core-esque thing with this really wonky cast of characters. Logan gets reincarnated as a fungaloid, which is arguably the single worst monster that you can get reincarnated as. And so, he's kind of, pardon my French, but he's sort of shit tier at the base, and all of the other dungeon lords sort of look down on him because he's so comparatively weak. But as he gets stronger, as he survives, and there's a lot of the dungeon cores do not survive. They are murdered sort of in horrendous, hilarious ways throughout the course of attending Shadowcroft Academy for Dungeon, which is why they have to recruit so broadly. But the longer he survives, they realize this is kind of like a sleeper class, and that he synergizes and can share his power with other dungeon cores. And so he cobbles together this group of extremely strange friends who have also been reincarnated. Treacle is this candy gnome who's been reincarnated as a minotaur who hates candy. Marco is this like foppish noble prince who's this drunken sort of satyr. And Inga is this sort of hoity-toity princess who incarnates as this lunar moth. And they have like this weird synergy. There's lots of weird jokes. It's very fun, very wholesome. If you like Dungeon Core, if you like something kind of absurd and off the wall, Shadowcroft is really, really fun. There's only 3 books out. The 4th book, which will be the final book in the series, it's year 4. Aaron and I are outlining it currently, and so that one will also be out in 2026. All
right, so Vigil.
Yes.
Vigil Bound, is that complete?
No. Unfortunately,
see how I did that? See how I brought that in there?
I say unfortunately not, but actually I'm kind of happy it's not. So I was telling you before the episode started, I'm doing my reread of the series to kind of refamiliarize myself with the characters and the world and the magic system. And I was telling you this too. Usually when I get done with a book, I have read it and reread it and edited it so many times. I'm like, I hate this book. I don't want to talk about this book. I don't even want to see this book again. I want to forget that this book ever happened, and I want to move on to the next book because I am so done with that book. And that's pretty much the way it is for all the books that I've ever written. But there's enough psychological distance with Vigil Bound that now I'm sitting down and I'm rereading it, and I'm like, actually, these are really good. These are like funny. I really like these characters. And so I'm doing my reread in preparation to outline book 5. And I promise the series is not abandoned. I'm coming back to it. Book 5 will be out this year. And originally, when I was outlining and planning out the series, I was only going to do 5 books because there's these 5 wards. If you're familiar with the series, there's like justice, valor, balance, truth, and wrath. And so there's going to be 5 books, one for each ward. And the last one was going to be Vigil's Truth. But I'm reading through them and I'm having so much fun. And I'm like, maybe this could be 6 books. Like, I know that wasn't the plan, but these are super fun. Like, I really like these characters. I kind of don't want it to end. So I'm going to outline book 5. We'll see where we're at. But it's not a non-zero possibility that there could even be a 6th book, just because, again, now that I'm like back in the world and I'm back with these characters, I'm like, these guys are a hoot, man. Vigil Bound is definitely my series. Like all of my series since the beginning have had either like first responder or military MCs, because that's my background. I'm a combat Marine, served in Iraq, and so they make great protagonists, right? Like you want, like most normal people, when they get dropped in a kind of weird, horrific, post-apocalyptic setting or get isekai'd to a fantasy world, they don't. Most people don't have the requisite skill set to like not be immediately murdered, but soldiers and Marines and first responders kind of have this elevated skill set where they're maybe a little bit more adaptable to a situation like that. I'm not saying that they wouldn't, that some of them wouldn't die, but it's a good backdrop for why they're competent at things that other people wouldn't be. And it's my background, so I draw on it a lot. But Vigil Bound especially is like my love letter to veterans. It's there's a lot of like dark gallows military humor that really bleeds through. And it's just such a fun series. I'm having such a good time with it. Boyd is the main character. but he's also got this. His best bud is a guy named Cal, who dies back in the real world before Boyd gets isekai. He dies in an IED blast. And when Boyd is haggling with this 5-faced god who wants to reincarnate him as a vigil, he says, "Hey, I'm going to give you a spirit guide." And Boyd says, "Well, hey, can my spirit guide be Cal, my best friend who died?" And they're like, "That would be a terrible choice. Like, he's not going to know anything about anything. He's not going to know anything more than you." And Boyd's like, "I don't care. He's my best friend. If I get to see him again, I don't care if I have the worst spirit guide on the planet, as long as my buddy gets to ride shotgun with me." And so they're like, "Okay, if this is the deal breaker, we're going to give you this thing." So it's him and Cal, and then there's this. He makes a deal with this little narcissistic, insane pixie named Renholm, who has these enormous delusions of grandeur, and is just kind of this chaos energy, pyromaniac, kleptomaniac, poor decision-making machine, but who is also kind of strangely helpful in some ways. And so they're kind of a fun team, honestly.
And at this point, I'm reading book 1.
Yeah.
Just because, I have to, I wanted to expand my James Hunter horizons before the interview, and I got sucked into it. I'm at the point where Boyd is learning. He's in his soul vault.
Okay, yeah.
Learning everything, adding his first upgrade to his armor, which seems to be like early evolution of relics and artifacts and discount. I don't know if that's accurate, but it seems like a progression or an advancement of that when you get to Discount Dan. So I am sucked into it, and that hits the crunchy part. I am big fan of crunch.
Yeah, well,
the crunchier the better. So
and one of the things, and for sure, I sometimes I'll explore an idea in one book, and then like as I'm writing through it, I'm like, man, I could have done so much more with that. And so you'll see that a lot, like early things seeded in a first series that then are more developed and changed in the next series because I liked the idea so much, but I felt like, man, I didn't do as much with that as I could. But with Vigilbound, one of the things that I really like is that unlike most LitRPG books, character gets a class, maybe the class always advances and it gets more powerful, but like what they are is essentially what they are. And Vigilbound, kind of the gimmick, if you want to call it that, is that Boyd has this ability. He has this enormous list of spells and abilities that he can choose from, but he can respec his abilities once every 12 hours. And so in that way, it's very Witcher-esque, where the monsters in this world are incredibly difficult to kill, and you need to know a lot about them to be able to do the job properly. And so most vigils operate, and you'll find out more about this in book 2. So this is minor spoilers, but most vigils operate in what they call a fist. There's 5 vigils in a fist, and there's one from every ward, so they kind of have a balanced party. But Boyd's riding solo, and so he has to have this unique ability to be able to basically compensate for being a one-man team. And there's a lot of legwork that has to happen. So it's very Witcher-esque in that sense. And I drew a lot on that, where you're customizing your armor and you're changing armor for battles, or you have to use different weapons. And I really enjoyed playing with that. So there's definitely some good crunch in Vigilbound, and I really enjoyed playing around with that system and kind of that idea of a character who's always evolving. And that was also one of the things that I think played into Discount Dan, because in Discount Dan, no one has it. There's not even classes. That's not a thing that exists. So you can't really get a class. It's just kind of you're cobbling together the best magical powers that you can get, hoping to survive another day, and then you're looking for ones that maybe synergize with each other. One of the things with Discount Dan that I really liked is that you can take all these weird, wonky, sometimes terrible abilities, and you can combine them in really strange ways to make sometimes worse, but sometimes much better abilities. And I kind of love that idea of these ever evolving character classes that kind of change with the needs of what the characters are facing at the time.
To me, we're gonna back over into Discount Dan real quick since you brought it up, and then we're gonna go back and we got one more series to go over, but with Discount Dan, with the relics and the artifacts and the combinations that that Dan experiments with, to me, that I call that just in time.
Yeah,
everything, he gathers things together, puts them together just in the nick of time. So that's why, to me, it's just in time upgrades, just in time weapons, and it's really cool that he just manages to put things together just in that nick of time in the kaiju battle, in the HOA battle. As he's growing and he just puts things together just right. But he's thinking about things all along, and he does try them, and he finds out that it's not good. But that is one of the cool things about the whole series.
So I've always been a big fan in my writing practices of what I call Q factors. So in the kind of early James Bond movies, right? There's Agent Q, and Agent Q, gives James Bond a laser pen. And he says, "Well, we're equipping you for this mission, and here's this laser pen," and they stick it in the pocket, and then that happens in Act 1, and then as the viewer, you kind of forget about it because it doesn't do anything. It just kind of sits in the pocket. And then in Act 3, when James Bond is at the mercy of the villain and he's strapped to the table and the laser's going to cut him in half, and how am I going to possibly get out of this? And then James Bond remembers, oh, wait, I have this laser pen in my pocket. He reaches down with his teeth and he pulls it out and he slashes his manacles, and all of a sudden James Bond is free. I always love that. I always love planting a Chekhov's gun somewhere in Act 1 or Act 2 that's going to have a major impact back in Act 3. But you never know what it's going to be, because a lot of the things that I plant are kind of these red herrings that go nowhere and do nothing. But one of them is always going to be this thing that Dan or Boyd or someone is going to bring back to realize, like, oh, man, I have this thing. I don't know if this is going to work, but it's worth a shot. And I think that also comes out of my love of urban fantasy. So I started out in urban fantasy. My first series, the Yancey Lazarus series, was kind of this grizzled, tough guy urban fantasy series. And urban fantasy has a much more like thriller-esque pacing, where you see that a lot. You see a lot of the just-in-times where, it's kind of like, man, these characters occasionally get kicked in the teeth quite a bit, and they always kind of come out on top, but only kind of come out on top. And it's always just like, you're like, ooh, oh man, it's Chekhov's baby heads. That's that's pretty funny. I like that. So I really enjoy doing that, even in series that are not urban fantasy. Vigilbound is actually urban fantasy, or at least in the way that it's written. Urban fantasy doesn't tend, like actual urban fantasy, like if you think Dresden Files, doesn't tend to do as well in the LitRPG space. For some reason, more traditional fantasy tends to be sort of the top seller. So I really wanted to write something that felt like urban fantasy, but that also readers were actually going to read. And so I designed Vigilbound it's this kind of gritty, epic, grim, dark setting, but it's got that same pacing of an urban fantasy novel, where there's a monster on the loose and you got to figure it out, and you have to go through leads, and you have to eliminate suspects, and you're kind of unraveling this mystery of, what is this monster? Why is this monster there? What is going on? How do I kill it before you can finally kill it? So I still enjoy that aspect of it for sure.
So there is one more series, or big series, that we have not talked about.
Yeah.
It would be VGO.
Yes.
That goes way back to the early iterations of how LitRPG was done.
Yeah.
The virtuals, the gaming, all that fun stuff. I have not really done that much. It's one of the areas I have not gone into. So
yeah,
talk to me about VGO and tell me why I should read it.
So early on, and I may have covered this with Jess, but I think it's worth reiterating. Early on, I think there was so much VR because people fundamentally did not understand what LitRPG was, right? Like I remember the first Dragon Con we went to was in like 2016 or 2017, I think. And there were 5 of us. It was like me and Travis Bagwell and Blaze Corbin and Ramon. And Ramon, who used to run, still does maybe, the LitRPG podcast, although I think he's slowed down because there's so many LitRPG books. he literally had trifold brochures about LitRPG, and people would come by the booth and he'd say, "Let me tell you about LitRPG." And I was like, "Ramon, they're gonna think we're a cult. You can't stop."
No, it's true.
Stop with the literature. It's not. You're scared people away with the literature. But people really fundamentally did not understand what the genre was. They'd say, "So is it choose your own adventure?" It's like, no, it's not choose your own adventure. So is it like the Dritz books where it's kind of related to D&D? Like, no. It's like the game system is in there. And so people could not understand. And so VR was it was basically a zero entry wading pool into the genre, because for readers who had no idea what this was, it made so much sense. It's like, oh, they're in a video game, and so there are numbers in my book. Well, that makes sense because they're in a video game. Of course there's numbers in the books because there's numbers in video games. And so I think it made it easier for people, for this genre that was so small and so unknown, for us to get readers in and for them to be able to give it a shot. Now that kind of we have this enormous reader base, everyone kind of knows what LitRPG is, they know what the tropes are. And so now I think VR is really out of fashion because there's not any perceived stakes, right? Like, and I hear that a lot when people are talking about VR. They're like, well, why do I care? It's like, you got the guy in the real world and then he's playing a video game. Why? Like, it's like watching a Twitch streamer play a video game, but in a book. Like, why do I care about that? There's no stakes. Which I think is and there are a lot of authors that balance that well and manage to interject or inject stakes, even when there's a real life component. VGO is a little bit different. Even then, when I first started writing, I had the same feelings about VR books. I enjoyed a lot of them, but I also found myself thinking, like, man, the stakes for me are not here in a lot of these books. And so it's hard for me to really care what the outcome of these stories are. So when I sat down to write out my first LitRPG, which was Viridian Gate Online, I said, man, I really want the stakes to be elevated. So the premise behind Viridian Gate Online is there's actually this cataclysmic asteroid that's hurtling toward Earth, and it's this extinction level asteroid that's going to wipe out 90% of humanity. And the governments have tried to stop this thing, and they cannot. All of the mega millionaires and billionaires are already secreted away in their bunkers, hoping to ride out the apocalypse. But the majority of people on Earth are just going to die, and everyone knows they're going to die. There's this tech billionaire named Robert Osmark who has developed this game that's the most immersive fantasy video game of all time, Viridian Gate Online. And he's developed sort of this Black Mirror-esque technology that allows you to digitize your consciousness. The catch is doing so will kill you. So you will die. And not everyone makes the transition, but of those who do, they basically have a shot to ride out the apocalypse in this ultra immersive fantasy world. So as soon as this happens, there's not really any more real world for them to go back to. This is their world. So even though it is VR, in that sense, it's really just an isekai novel, except 10 million people are being isekai'd simultaneously into this new world that's kind of this Warcraft, Skyrim-esque, ultra immersive fantasy world where you see sort of all the regular trappings of video games. There's dungeons and there's classes and there's monsters. But there's also this backdrop where Robert Osmark, in order to get this technology online before this asteroid hits, has made backdoor deals with oligarchs and drug runners and arms dealers all over the world. And they've supported him launching this thing. But as a result, they sort of expect to become the new feudal lords over Viridian Gate Online. And so they have all these sort of built-in cheats. And so Jack and his partner Abby, who worked for Oztech, discover this. And so they're permanently in this fantasy world, but now they also realize that the game is being rigged in favor of these billionaires and these moguls, and they have to find a way to stop that before it turns into humanity's last salvation turns into this kind of this digital dark age. And so it's got all of the big epic fantasy stuff that you would like to see. It's got really cool classes. Jack becomes he stumbles onto this class, the Shadowmancer class. So he's kind of this shadow paladin. Abby, his friend, is a firebrand, so she's sort of a fire mage. Jack's sort of sidekick is a guy named Cutter, who's the best rogue in all of Elgard, and he's notoriously vain, but he's the thief with the golden heart. And Jack gets this cool shadow drake. There's lots of really cool, fun things that happen in the series, but then it's kind of this back and forth war where the stakes are very real, because this is the only world that exists now, and Jack's trying to save this world, save his friends, save his family from an eternal serfdom under the ruling thumb of all of these kind of rich assholes. So it's got all the big epic fantasy stakes, but kind of with this modern gamer twist thrown in, and I still love that series. I think it's one of the best out there.
Damn it. Just something else to read. So, but even with VGO now, it's just not your series.
Yeah, that's true.
There are add-ons.
That's
similar
right.
to what Tao Wong did with his System Apocalypse. There's add-on stories. What's going on with that?
Yeah, so all of the stories. So at the time, again, VR is more out of vogue now than it was. But at the time, VGO was probably one of the top 3 LitRPG series for several years. And it was popular enough that I had authors reach out to me that were readers and fans of the books. And they were like, hey, we love this universe. We'd love to write stories set inside the universe. And I was really tickled by that idea, because I really, Emily Godhand did Heartfire Healer. DJ Bodden did The Illusionist. JD Astra did Firebrand series. NH Paxton did The Alchemic Weaponeer, but there's a bunch of them out there. But I really love this idea, because I love the concept of like, hey, Jack is the main character of the Viridian Gate Online main series, but there are literally millions of people who have experienced the same thing. They all dodged the apocalypse by gambling on this technology that allows them to basically isekai to this fantasy world. And they're all doing their own things. And so I love that idea of the kind of the main events or the backdrop for all of those series. But all of the series can be read independently. Even if you haven't read the main series, you could pick up any one of those series. And they're all sort of self-contained trilogies, with the exception of The Illusionist, which has 4 books. But they're self-contained trilogies that follow their own specific character. Most of them explore a different part of the world than what we see in VGO. In the main series, they have their own storylines, their own classes, their own quests, they're their own people doing their own things, and kind of the backdrop of the main series and the main conflict sort of looms there. But in the same way that, if the U.S. was at war, you kind of hear about it on the news, or someone's shipping off, but it's they're doing their own things. I love that idea of kind of having this immersive world, and I think that for people who enjoy this series, it makes the world feel much more lived in, because you realize that, like, wow, this thing that Jack, this place that Jack mentions, but that we literally never see, is its own complete system with its own unique economy and its own kings and rulers and holy orders. And here are these people doing these things over here that really matter as well. So it's really fun, and it was really a privilege to be able to be a part of that and to get to see that come to life in such a cool way.
So everything is cyclical, seemingly. So if there is a cyclical back to VR or VMMO or whatever, would you be able to resurrect it in some similar fashion, either by yourself or with the help or additional stories? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, 100%. I still love VGO. I love all of the series that I've worked on, but VGO, I still think is some of my best storytelling, because of the scope of it. A lot of the other stories, Rogue Dungeon has kind of a similar scope, in that it's big, it's epic, it's got a lot of things going on. But VGO, I always felt like was a really genuinely big, epic fantasy. And even though it's limited on Jack's POV, you see sort of all of these nations going to war, and you see this political intrigue. And I love that series. And it is open-ended. I don't want to give spoilers, but at the end of book 8, you kind of find out, this is a soft spoiler, but I don't think it really ruins anything. You find out that Elgard, the continent that they're on, is not the only continent in this world. And there's actually another continent that's separated by this thing called the Storm Wall. And we find out that the Storm Wall is going to come down because of various actions that Jack and some of the other characters take in the course of the main series before it's supposed to. So after about 15 or 16 years, the Storm Wall is going to come down, and this whole other sort of lost continent with all of these other people is now going to be accessible. And so I left it open-ended in case I wanted to revisit it. And I really would genuinely love to go back to that world. I even have sort of a rough outline for a new trilogy set in that universe that would be pretty easy to pick up and just jump right back into. But I think right now, with where the market's at, it just doesn't make sense, because there's not enough people that are interested in reading those types of stories, even though, again, it is VR in the strictest sense of the word. But after about chapter 2 of book 1, you could pretty easily replace VR for isekai, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But with the branding, it just doesn't work that way. So I would love to go back to that universe. Is the short part of the answer.
So now we have a really wonderful and great segue with that. Where do you see LitRPG going over the next few years? What is your informed opinion?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I think with the success that the DCC has seen, it's taken the genre mainstream in a very unprecedented way that I would not have anticipated. And I think it's bringing a lot of new readers into the genre that were formerly like, no, that's like weird choose your own adventure books or something like that. I'm not going to mess around with that. But now they've read DCC and they're like, wow, actually, these are addictive, and I need more books like this book. So I think we're going to see a broader, more mainstream acceptance of LitRPG that there was not in the past for a long time, still a little bit. I think LitRPG is kind of like the redheaded stepchild of the literary world, where people are like, yeah, you're one of those weirdos who writes the video game books. And that's kind of been the ongoing sentiment in a lot of writer circles. But now I think that narrative is finally starting to shift. Traditional publishers are more interested in it. I think we're going to see more LitRPG books hitting actual bookshelves as opposed to just being indie published. With that said, I still think that individual indie publisher authors or small publishers like Shadow Alley, Mountaindale, Portal, Aethon are still going to play a broader role than maybe the big traditional publishers like Penguin and Random House, because we know our market so much better than these folks do, and we know exactly how to reach our readers. We know exactly what they want. And also, traditional publishing is really, really slow. It's glacially slow. One book a year is kind of the max that you're going to get, and LitRPG readers, they don't want one book a year. They want they want all of the books right now, preferably. And so I think you need some speed to market. I think in terms of what's going to continue to do well, I still see sort of like more cozy slice of life continuing to be on the horizon for a little while anyways. Books like Battle Mage, Farmer, Beware of Chicken, Heretical Fishing, Apocalypse is a Side Quest. I think those books are going to continue to do well. I maybe am seeing a shift away from that in the same way that sort of VR was oversaturated and people were like, I'm kind of bored of this. I've seen enough of these stories. I want something else. I think post-apocalyptic is here to stay for a while. That seems to be kind of forever green.
Thank God.
I'm really enjoying Sean Oswald's Welcome to the Multiverse. That's a fantastic series that I'm just absolutely loving. But I don't foresee the pendulum swinging back around to VR in the short term. At the same time, I think as more mainstream lit RPG readers come in, I think VR could have an upsurge from those more mainstream readers. And the reason why I think that is because all of the lit RPG readers that are familiar with all the tropes, most of them don't even care why a system exists. They're just like, yeah, there's a system. I get it. You don't have to tell me anymore. I'm in. And because they kind of know the tropes, they know the background, they don't care for an explanation for why the thing is the way. Why does magic run on numbers? Who cares? I don't. I just want to see the numbers go up. But for more modern readers or more mainstream readers who are not as familiar with lit RPG, I've talked with a lot of them, and they bounce off of some of those series, even if they're really popular, because they don't get it, and they're not steeped enough in the lore of lit RPG to be able to, just like, it was confusing. All of a sudden there's numbers in my book and there's percentiles, and I don't know why any of this is happening. But VR is still a very, very easy zero entry pool for mainstream readers. It's one of the things I think DCC did so well, and why DCC was so successful is because there was a really compelling reason for why are there numbers in my book that everyone could get their head around. And I think some of the other lit RPG series, even though they're great and super popular, more broad mainstream readers might have a more difficult time getting on board with them until they have a dozen lit RPG titles under their belt and they kind of understand the nuances of the genre. So VR could make a comeback if more mainstream readers continue to pour in.
What was your favorite read of 2025? Sorry.
Ooh, that's hard. That's really hard. I'm really enjoying Unintended Cultivator by Eric Dontigny. It's progression fantasy, not lit RPG. It is up there for sure. I'm gonna give you my top three. I don't think I can just do one.
Okay.
One is
no, I understand that totally.
Bog Standard Isekai is up there. Miles English. Both of those are Shadow Alley books, so I might be biased, but also they're just so good. They're so good. And Bog Standard Isekai, I really love, like, just how well it's written, how well the characters are drawn, but also that it's not this crazy, OP character right out of the gate. Everything feels very earned. The world feels very lived in. It's amazing. And then I'd have to say Welcome to the Multiverse by Sean Oswald, which is not a Shadow Alley book, but it is absolutely incredible. I have been enjoying just every minute of it. And I can't get enough of it. So thankfully I'm only on book 5. And I think there's 5 more left in the series. So I have some more reading to do before I hit the bottom of that barrel, which I'm
in chapter 2 maybe of book 1 for
okay.
Well, so I have a hell of a lot more to go.
It's again, really incredible. I've been enjoying it tremendously.
So, yep. And 2. Can I come up with 2 other ones? Project Tartarus Archie is one of my favorites of the year. It came out of Row Road, I believe, and Immersive Ink is where the author hangs out a lot.
Yeah.
Isekai, hard Isekai, where he just remembers nothing, utterly crunchy to the extreme that I loved it. Greek mythology background into it. That's one of my top reads of the year as well. I tell people to read it all the time. And you will find out. I'm going to do my top 10 favorites within the next few weeks. So
I'm excited to see it.
We will see that. And I already told him Discount Dan's up there. We already know that. DCC has to be up there just because I read all 7 books in 2025.
I mean, it still continues to be the gold standard in a lot of ways for lit RPG, and I'm not sure that there's ever going to be a book or series to unseat it. And I'm a huge DCC fan. My biggest complaint is that Matt, 1, does not write fast enough, and 2, that there are not more books in the marketplace like it. And that was one of the things that drove me to write Discount Dan, in the same way that it's, you know, not enough dungeon core was one of the things that drove me to write Rogue Dungeon. And is that I find something that I like, I read through all of it, and I'm like, all right, where are more books like this book? And there's nothing like DCC. There's Buy Mort was kind of in the same vein, but it didn't scratch the itch enough for me. I still read through those and I enjoyed them, but there just wasn't enough. Just like in the early days, I read Divine Dungeon, and it was really only Divine Dungeon. That was kind of Dakota Kraut's Divine Dungeon was kind of the only dungeon core book out there, and I was like, this slaps. Where are the rest of the dungeon core books? And this was before Jonathan Brooks, who's now probably the king of dungeon core.
Yep.
And I remember thinking like, well, but I want more of this, and I want more of it right now. And I remember tearing through Reddit and going through Amazon and coming to this awful gut wrenching realization, like the books that you want do not exist. And I was mad about that. And I was like, well, I'm going to just write the books that I want then. And that's my biggest complaint right now with DCC is DCC feels almost like it's the first book in a subgenre of LitRPG, which is kind of the surrealist dark horror comedy, which was absolutely new and unique to Matt and DCC in the same way that Divine Dungeon was sort of unique to Dakota Kraut in the early days of the Dungeon Core stuff. And so my biggest complaint right now is I love books with that kind of weird, dark, but undercut with comedy vibes. And there's not more of them. I'm really hoping, and I think part of that is that the DCC fans are so rabid that they can be very protective of the community. And I think a lot of people have been afraid of trying to write books that touch on those same things in any way because they don't want to get, sort of lambasted. But I'm really hoping that more authors will take a crack at writing books, kind of with a similar tone or similar themes, because I want to read them. I love books like that. I want more books like that. So I'm
okay, so let me interrupt. I'm going to go. There is one that might do the itch. It's very absurd. It's very parody. It's a big parody of things on Earth and in space. It's right over there.
Is it Slayerable?
Slayerable.
I haven't tried it yet.
Slayerable is just weird. What I loved about it is the character Sam is from Philly.
I love that.
So I lived in South Jersey 32 years. I know Philly. As soon as before the apocalypse hits, he gets onto a SEPTA bus. I'm like, what the hell? It's a SEPTA bus. And Broad Street, it was just perfect. I loved it. That's the only one in the world, by the way, in existence. That's awesome. So that, if you want a DCC parody, take a look at it. Not only that, Dinnaman has a quote on it. So Dinnaman likes it. So, yeah.
I'll check it out for sure.
Go grab it.
I also like one of the things I think we'll see more of, and which I personally am excited about, is LitRPG that's not just high fantasy. And I still really enjoy the LitRPG that is high fantasy, swords and sorcery, that kind of thing. But for a long time, the genre was kind of pigeonholed in that anything outside of that just really struggled to sell. Sci-fi really struggled to sell. With the exception of sort of System Apocalypse, that was kind of the outlier where it didn't have to be high fantasy and it still did well. But I think kind of new genres being incorporated into LitRPG is really exciting. Dakota Kraut has a new sort of romantasy series called Damsels of Distress, which is these fairy tale retellings. I'm excited to see more things like that. I'm a big horror fan, which I think kind of bleeds through in a lot of my books, but especially in Discount Dan. And I'm excited to see more sort of horror leaning LitRPGs. I really enjoyed the GameLit Carousel. I thought was really, really fun, very inventive, has some really ingenious mechanics. The Cabin is Always Hungry, which I believe is still on Royal Road, kind of dungeon core horror. is really fun, really interesting as well. And I love that. In the early days, I had a friend named Sam Witt, and we published some of his books, but he had written a horror book, a horror lit RPG, which I loved, called Slayer Game. And I remember being an advanced reader for it and just thinking, man, this is so cool and so novel, and I love this premise. And he probably released this in 2017, so this was like early days of LitRPG, and it absolutely flatlined on release. And I was so sad because I loved it so much, and I was like, this is so good. Why do people not realize how good this is? Why are people not buying this? And it's because it wasn't fantasy. And so I love the idea that now we're starting to get to see kind of these other genres make the jump and get their own lit RPG adaptations as well. It's very fun, very cool.
And there are just so many concepts, ideas out on the railroad.
Yes.
New, they can experiment. They're not, they don't have to risk too much, all that fun stuff. And what Athon puts out and what Portal puts out, there's so many newish type concepts, and I snag them because, even though I have you here, the giant in the industry, a lot of the people I'm going to be interviewing are up and comers. Joe Dan is going to be considered an up and comer, I would think, still, because he's got 2 books coming out.
Yeah.
So I look for
he's a rock star. He's so nice.
I have to go listen to his recent In Other Worlds. So I have to take a look at that in preparation for ours next month. So I am big into new books, new styles, new authors, new everything. Oh, Kenny King. Anything by Kenny King that he puts out in paperback, I buy. System optimization. Yeah, people complain about repetition and whatnot, but it's not there. There's actually growth in his books as well. Big fan. So that's always up there for me as well.
I love that. Man, you are such a rock star, Pop-Up. I mean, I seriously, like the way that you have like just taken to the genre and you're like, yes.
Oh, it's awesome. Everything.
I am the genre now. Like, I love that so much. I love diving in head first.
I have to get a new shirt for next year. So
yeah.
So I think we have gone over an hour, which is usually normally, according to the long-winded one, 22 minutes is the perfect time. Well, I screw that every time I open my mouth. So that's not going to happen. James, thank you for showing up tonight. Thank you for entertaining my audience. I will get a lot of this dissected. There's so much, segmentation that can happen that will get it out to YouTube and TikTok and go from there. If you want me to, send you can tell me what you want me to cut apart for you over in StreamYard, and I'll send them up to you. Just, take a look at it.
Whatever you think is going to be best, you let me know. I'll post it up on my TikTok and over on my Facebook. But thank you so much for spending the time to do this, to talk with us, and not just me, but in general for the authors in the community, for the readers in the community. Like, I know it's an enormous labor of love. I know there's a lot that goes into it, and I just cannot thank you enough for it. Small thank you. The bathrobe is coming. I hope you enjoy the heck out of it.
Dude, I cannot wait. There will be Gary B and pop-up pictures galore.
I love it.
So they might arrest us walking down the streets of Denver in them, but so as long as we're in jorts, we'll be okay.
Yep. But thank you again for having me on,
Absolutely.
and thank you for all the folks who joined us tonight. It was so nice seeing you all and chatting.
Take care, guys. Thank you very much for showing up. We'll talk soon. I have to hit this button twice. This is always the part that Brian loves me because I can never find out where it is. Oh, there we go. All right, one more time. Okay, guys. Ciao.
Night, everyone.